The Photograph. Written by J.P. Toit. Narrated by J.P. Toit. In the photograph, I am beautiful. I am young. I am naked. I am whole. In the background, you can see the wreckage of some catastrophe. There had been a devastating flood that had laid waste to the small town at the time. We were passing through, in our roundabout fashion, on towards the Cape. It was the first holiday together for Peter and me. I looked challengingly into the lens. I am wearing the peace symbol earrings, a necklace supposedly signifying my detachment from all bonds, which looks simply like an old-fashioned razor blade, and I wear a thin black rubber band around my wrist indicating a promised promiscuity. My breasts point rebelliously forward, and my pubic hair is untrimmed. I am still unaware of all the changes that will shape me like clay, until I am the person I am now. In the photograph, I am lost, but more of that later. Now, I am a mother, a wife. I am 49 years old. I have 2 children. Pete, who is 15 years old, wants to become the next Rake Neetling. Pete spends half his life swimming, either training or competing in the Olympic-sized pool at his school, or in the Indian Ocean with his swimming buddies. He recently completed a basic lifeguard course, and is looking to do that over the school holidays for some extra pocket money. He is quite tall for his age, and a bit of a mommy's boy, not that I'm complaining. When I was younger, I used to be a bit of a night owl, and now I'm so used to dropping him off every morning at 5:30 a.m. for training. I worry about the day when he is also out of the house. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. I wonder if I'll still wake up at such an ungodly hour out of a habit. Jeannie was 19 and is the brainier of the two, as she never failed to remind her brother, at which point I'd be forced to intervene. She did ballet as a little girl, and her favorite color is pink. She had the most beautiful long blonde hair, and was studying actuarial science at UCT. She'd recently met a boy who she said she was very fond of. It is funny how she never considered I was young too, once upon a time. If she had a failing, it was that she is excessively polite, and is too trusting of people. She took after her father that way. I loved both my little ones, for that is what they would always be to this mama hen, very much, and always said a sacrifice for their well-being could only ever be a gain for mine. My husband's name is Peter. He took the photo I spoke of earlier. He was the short, silent type. At times he could be insufferably patient, but he was a good man, a good father. I don't think I have ever heard him raise his voice or seen him lash out in anger. It is extremely irritating sometimes to talk to him, as he will happily retreat into his shell until the storm has blown over. He exudes this confident reassurance that everything will work out as it must, even when it seems like it isn't. There's a gentle toughness to him, though. For example, in his stubborn refusal to lock the car doors at the robot, even when the hawkers have no visible goods to sell. He works as a lawyer for the state. Early on in our marriage, he encouraged me to stop cutting hair for other people and helped me open my own salon. His kindness and virtue is biblical in its goodness. It was a typical Saturday afternoon. I was just looking to do some spring cleaning. Then we found the photograph. Well, Pete found it. Pete was helping me clean out the garage so that he could go watch some band called the Arctic Monkeys perform later that night. I was well aware that this seemingly spontaneous helpful behavior was simply him strengthening his case to go to the concert. He had already bought a ticket over the internet, with his own money, mind you, but I appreciated the extra hands. Fuck! I heard a crash and spun around to make sure that he was still in one piece. Pete, I said reproachfully. One of the boxes had toppled over onto the garage floor. Sorry, my bad, Mom. He smiled, looking sheepish. I didn't mean to. Cool. What is it? I asked. He bent down quickly and picked up one of the pictures that had spilled out of the cardboard box. "Nothing," he said hastily, before giggling nervously. "Let me see. Can I go to the bathroom?" "Sure, can I have the picture?" He sighed and kind of handed it over. I had to literally wrench it free from his hand. I looked at the photograph. "What is it?" "It's a picture from your dad's days as an amateur photographer." "Wicked!" I looked up and frowned at Pete, and he had the good grace to look sheepish again under his unruly mop of hair. "I'm just going to go show your father," I told Pete. "If Dad doesn't want it, can I get it?" he shouted after me. "It's very artistic and stuff." My son, who wanted to have a kickabout rather than go into the Rembrandt Museum when we were in Amsterdam last year. My son, the 15-year-old. Due to the parent pact, he never considers I was young once. I'm not supposed to understand what he really wants the photo for. As I walked along the hallway leading from the garage, I wondered how it would affect him if he knew it was his mother in the picture. I stared at the photograph, lost in all that had been lost. I traced my finger along the curvature of my kneeling younger self's body. Walking in your own house, you don't need eyes, just feet. My feet carried me towards a study where I was sure Peter would be. My hair was shorter in the photograph than it is now. I'd grown my hair a great deal over the last couple of years. In the photo, it's cut in a bob, a mild impersonation of Purdy from the New Avengers. She inspired the belief in me that a woman can kick ass and look good doing it. She represented femininity at a time when it was a very foreign concept in my mind, and I found her to be a very beautiful woman. The Purdy haircut framed my younger face, my less creased and aged face. Peter says I'm a petite gem. A less biased person would say I'm a diminutive version of a woman, and I just think I look mousy. In the photograph, my body was still young and taut. What sagged with age now was firm and lithe then. I can't remember why I'd chosen to be naked in the picture. You can see my clothes folded neatly in the foreground. Perhaps it was because 2 days after such a terrible tragedy, of the many deaths and wanton destruction that flooded the town, no sign remained other than the wreckage and the pain of all those who lost something to the flood. I remember my father, for the first time, being involved with a strike on the mine, and my mother had been on his back at that time, accusing him of laziness, even though it was something very much out of his control. If I had to entitle the photograph, I would call it The Beauty of Langsberg. "You should see this," I said to Peter as I entered his study with a knock. He looked up and smiled. That was probably his most endearing characteristic, that every time he looked at me as if for the first time, and always seemed pleasantly surprised by his good fortune. "What is it, love?" "It's a picture from our first holiday." I held up the photograph for him from the other side of the desk. He stared at it fixedly, standing up slightly in his chair, and his smile grew wider. "You look just as beautiful as you do today," he said, smiling widely at me. "That brings back a lot of memories." I shrugged, shaking my head slowly, and said, "A picture is worth 1,000 words." He motioned for me to come to him. I didn't want to really, but I went to him anyway. I sat down on his lap and he held me like a child. "What's wrong?" he asked kindly. I can't," I mumbled. I choked back on tears coming unbidden to my eyes. "I can't help seeing all that I have lost. I was beautiful then." "You still are," he assured me, and held me as I cried softly into his shoulder. He held my face in his hands and turned it gently to look at him. "You still are beautiful. You always will be. I would actually say you're more beautiful now." He indicated the picture with a nod of his head. You were a little rebel without a cause then, and, very pretentious." I laughed with a snort, and he smiled at me as he brushed a tear off my cheek. He took his hand and placed it under the baggy top I was wearing. He placed his hand on my heart and kissed me lightly on the lips. His pinky finger barely touched my left scar. He had put his hand over my heart between the twin scars marking what felt like my lost womanhood. The scars mark where my breasts had been taken from me. "I love you," he said sincerely, looking into my eyes. I looked at the photograph again, focusing once more on what I had lost. If a photo is worth 1,000 words, then this one shouts lost 1,000 times. I looked at my perky young body. I traced the outline of my breasts with my eyes. I looked at the photograph. I looked at the only photograph of my breasts. The end.